So today we're going to be discussing all things basic, and apparently I could fit into that category because all of my reading is basic and so is my taste, so it's a great day to be alive, people. Hello book reading friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Mel and today I bring you the opposite of what we did last time. So last time we did me reacting to your unpopular book opinions and you guys really liked that video, and so I thought, why not flip the script, right? Let's do something similar yet different, and this time I'm going to be reacting to your basic book opinions. I'm going to read them out loud, discuss them with you guys, say if I agree or disagree, if there's anything particularly interesting that jumps out as I sift through these. I don't have a pre-selection before filming the video. I just go in blind, and whatever it is that I see is whatever I read. So that is what we're gonna be doing today. And before I get started with all the basic book opinions, I do need to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video who made it all possible, and that is Book of the Month. If you've been here for a while, you'd be no stranger to Book of the Month. I absolutely love them, and it's a service that I use every single month to choose new releases that can get to my household without the need of me having to research so much. Book of the Month is a super popular and fast-growing online book service for readers where you basically choose one book from their selection every single month. These all come from new and early release titles, and how the selection works every single month is that their team vets through hundreds of books to give you guys a curated selection of 5 titles so you can choose one and get delivered a stunning blue box every single month. And if you don't like a specific title, you can skip any month at any time, which is great. You don't get charged. There is no penalty, there is no fault in doing so. It is something that you can completely customize in whatever way you want. And I do have all of the books that they put for this month's selection, so let's run through them very quickly, give you a tiny little bit of a synopsis. First up, we've got The Love Hypothesis, which I really do want to squeeze into September because I recently found out that this is inspired on Raylo fan fiction. After a fake relationship generates real sparks, a rising scientist must decide if she's ready to experiment with love. This month we also have a memoir, which is great, and that is A Beautiful Country. A moving memoir filtered through a child's eyes about a Chinese family struggling in the shadow of the American dream. For a contemporary fiction, we have The Sweetest Remedy. An unexpected loss leads a young woman on a soul-searching journey to reconnect with her Nigerian family and find herself. For a thriller, we've got Rock, Paper, Scissors. When a remote anniversary getaway turns eerie, a couple learns if their marriage can bear the weight of their secrets. And speaking of secrets, the very last book is called The Neighbor's Secret. A suburban book club discovers life can be more disturbing than fiction when a vandal disrupts life on the cul-de-sac. So these are all of this month's selections, and if you would like to sign up, again, you can use my code MelReads to get your first book for $9.99, and the link for that is at the top of my description if you would like to check Book of the Month out. Thank you again to them for being the absolute greatest and for sponsoring today's video, and without further ado, let's get right into your basic book opinions. And as always, I asked you guys on Instagram and also this time around on YouTube to leave me all of your basic book opinions. I don't know what I'm going to stumble upon. I am sure there's a lot of these that I am going to disagree with, especially if the Grishaverse comes up, especially if the Folk of the Air series comes up, because I don't vibe with any of those, but there might be a few that I agree with, because I can even admit that some of my reading tastes, if not the majority of them, are pretty basic, and you know what? I'm not even mad about it. The very first one that I am seeing that jumps out to me, you can judge a book by its cover, with the little emoji, that one, and I certainly do. I am not gonna lie, this old saying of like, you can't judge a book by its cover, have you seen these ugly fuckers? Have you seen, and that doesn't go to say that the content inside might be great, because they might be. These covers, let's talk about them. Who wants a shirtless man? I mean, I do, I certainly do, just not on my bookshelf. I don't want a shirtless guy staring back at me whenever I want to pick up a book. Though I know it is appealing to certain people, I just personally don't vibe with that sort of cover style. I also don't vibe with people on the cover of a book. There are certain covers that I look at that I don't see the story reflected on there. Whether I've read a book or whether I just know some details about it based on the synopsis, I definitely am a judger. And I don't know a single person who doesn't. If you don't, let me know down in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious. I think because it's the first glimpse that you get of a book. It's the first thing you see when you walk into a bookstore, when you click on a book online. If the cover's ugly, you might not click on it. And I've definitely been guilty of passing up on books that I'm sure are great based on what I've heard other people say, but because I have been judging the cover, I haven't picked it up. So I'm definitely guilty of this, and I know the majority of us are too. We Were Liars is bad, and we once more stumble into We Were Liars territory. We also did in the last video. If we were talking 2 years ago, I'd say that is a very basic opinion. We Were Liars was bad. It's objectively bad. Most of us can agree on that. However, based on the hype surrounding this book now given TikTok, and even how that has trespassed that territory onto booktube again and onto bookstagram again, I think this book, it's making its resurgence in a way that we haven't seen before, in a way that people are enjoying it now more than ever, strangely enough. And I don't know if this is a basic opinion anymore. Now, if the opinion was We Were Liars is great, I would say that's a basic opinion given the times, though this might be a split one. I'm not sure. Floppy paperbacks are the best, and that is not only a basic opinion, but also the right one. There is nothing more uncomfortable than reading a book that's stiff. For example, Priory. Priory is a book that wasn't originally floppy. It still is not. It has some wiggle to it now, but this is a book that I had to do this in order to read it, because otherwise I would have read the book like this. This is just a little bit uncomfortable to read, and I'm gonna have to extra do this, and even then I can't really see the words that are right at the crevice. You have something like Darius the Great, and this is just mad floppy. You can open this and actually read the book comfortably, and you don't need to be doing this. So it's just a comfortable reading experience. It's not even the comfortable reading experience part of it sometimes, but just the satisfying element of being able to open a book, get it out of its package, and do this. It's the flop test. It's just good. It's nice. All books I have in a series needs to be the exact same format and design style. Now, this is an interesting one because I was recently talking to one of my patrons about this. They had just bought a few Sanderson books and they were making sure that all of them were in the same edition. Now, I definitely agree with this to an extent. I definitely have books in series that do not match up. Like Scythe, that is an example that I always bring up in a series of mine that particularly doesn't match. All of the books are in different copies and formats, and I also believe The Mortal Instruments is like that as well. The Witcher so far for me doesn't really match. Pages & Co. doesn't match. I particularly am a person that I don't really mind it. Depending on how willing I am to go out of my way to make them match, I will. I have certainly done that again with Sanderson books. I have definitely done that in cases like Strange the Dreamer, and I know I've done that with several other series as well, especially when it comes down to special editions. I will hunt a bitch down, okay? I will hunt the book down if need be. I will go to the depths of the internet to make sure that I find the matching edition to a special book. I know, I'm crazy. I did that. I did that with the Stormlight Archive. They're sitting outside. They just got here. However, I don't do that with everything. Like sometimes if I buy a paperback first because I don't know if I'm gonna love a series and then end up buying the rest in hardcover or mix and match them all, I'll go ahead and do that. I really don't mind it, but I really do think that most people feel that way, whether it's because of OCD purposes, that they just want everything to match, or because the editions are pretty, or because they just want something to feel special and complete. Whichever the case, I really do know that it's a very common opinion. So I will say, based on the basic meter, it is pretty basic. Third person narration is superior. Now, I don't know if this is basic or not. In my brain, it might be. I personally prefer third person narration all the way. It definitely beats first person every single time, especially in fantasies and sci-fis. I find that when you have a bigger cast of characters and you've got a more ambitious story and you've got something that really just expands through universes and worlds, and it's got so much magic and you've got a war happening and there's so many moving elements to a story, having it be narrated in third person just allows the story to be bigger than what you'd expect. It allows for more moving elements, and it also makes for a more emotional story, in my opinion. You not only get to see a certain POV, a certain individual fight, but you get to see the reaction on another end of the war. You get to see the friends' reactions, the family's reaction, the loved one's reaction, and it makes for a more emotionally complex story, and it really gets me personally. When I'm reading third person, I am more likely to cry than when I'm reading in first. So personally myself, I really enjoy third person narration. It beats everything every single time. Even for contemporaries, it's just great. I'd much rather have that rather than anything else. Maybe not in contemporaries, but in the genres that I read the most, I definitely would rather have that. The book is always better than the movie. I think that's a really basic one. I think I can judge that myself. I think for the most part, we are always scared as readers for adaptations. We're always scared if the characters are going to come across exactly as they did on page, especially again when it comes to fantasies. I feel like I always turn everything into a fantasy talk, but when you have fantasies and you have sci-fis and you've got all of these made up words and worlds and even dress codes and religions and everything in between, you're so scared of how that's going to come across on screen, if it's going to be represented well, if the message and the conversations that the author put inside the book are going to be put into the script as well. And so it's always a scary thought to kind of have your baby be kind of snatched away and grabbed by this complete stranger who might not even be as familiarized with the story as a reader would be, and to do with it whatever they want to do with it. And so it's always a scary thought. It requires a lot of trust on the reader's end, and also just a lot of knowledge and research on the creator's side of it for the people who are going to adapt it. I'm always nerve-wracked. I'm always peeping like, oh, who's picking up the project, and then who's the producer, and then who's the director? Have they done anything that I've liked in the past? Have I experienced things that have been better on screen than in the books? Yes, Shadow and Bone is one of them. I personally think the show is better. Not only did the show do a better job, at least from what I've read, at making Mal more likable, but it also just made it a more engaging story with a lot of different conversations that the book didn't have, explicitly and mostly about race, that I personally found really intriguing in the show. So I think sometimes, especially for older books that have been out for a while, I do think that an adaptation allows for growth, and it allows for the work to feel more current than it would have years in the past. And so I think adaptations have a lot of potential. It just depends on who's carrying them out. But most times I would agree that the book is better than the show or the movie or whatever it's being adapted into. Not Like Other Girls makes me want to DNF immediately. And I will say, I think this is a pretty basic, or not necessarily basic, but I say that it's a common enough opinion that people have. I think especially now, I think I've read several books that have done the reverse of that and have done the what could be considered like other girls, like the girly girl, the one who likes fashion and the one who likes going shopping and who doesn't like sports. And I've seen books like that, and I appreciate books like that as well, because they kind of give you, I guess, a more realistic outlook onto the world. Even down to the rom-coms that I used to watch when I was younger, every single girl was not like other girls. And not like other girls in what sense? Oh, because they wore jeans instead of skirts, or because they were brunettes instead of blondes, or because they read and other girls do not, or because they like rock music and girls are not supposed to like rock music. And I just think it created such, I don't want to say negative stigma around what it really means to be a woman or not, but I will say that it definitely created sort of this expectation to not be extremely girly because that's frowned upon, and that's just not the case. It's like, if I were to be judged by any sort of standard in that sense, it's like, I like makeup and fashion, therefore I can't read, and that's just unrealistic. Like it feels wrong in so many different ways to kind of box people in this sort of way, where in order to like one thing you have to shun the other. It's just not the world that we live in. And so while I have enjoyed books in the past that have been not like other girls, I think when I solidify my opinion now on this subject, on this matter, I really get infuriated at what it's cost for young people out there, because I just don't think it's fair to create that standard. But I completely understand why it makes you want to DNF immediately. I think now if I were to read a book like that and I caught onto it because it's very obvious, I would probably put the book down as well. This is an interesting one, and I think this might be 50-50. I hate retellings of other stories like Peter Pan, Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, etc. I think this is pretty split. I am definitely a sort of person that I say I enjoy retellings, but then I read retellings and then I don't like them. And it happened to me, I think, a lot during the period of time where I was reading sort of like Peter Pan retellings. I read Lost in the Neverwoods, and then I read Straight Until Morning, and I disliked both of them, and I disliked them hard. Like I wanted to chuck them out a window and never see them again. And so while I say that I enjoy retellings, I just don't think I've seen a retelling that is absolutely stellar. But I think this might be an evenly split opinion, whereas some people truly love it and they go out of their way to look for books like those, and then there's people who absolutely despise them and they will not get near a book that is a retelling. I think I fall somewhere in the middle, where I have found out that I don't like certain retellings, like Peter Pan. I will probably never read a Peter Pan retelling ever again. And then then there's others that I will probably give a chance to, but don't have high expectations for it at all. I also think this is a really common opinion where the second book is never as good as the first one. I actually got that one a lot. I think recently I've been experiencing the opposite. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think that one might be a basic opinion, and I do think a lot of people think the same thing. I definitely thought the same thing when I was younger. I have read some series where the second book does not even touch the first one. That's certainly been the case for some of them. I definitely enjoyed Skyward more than I did Starside. I will also say things like Vicious Spirits, which is the sequel to Wicked Fox, I enjoyed the same, if not more than the first one, and the first one was already 5 stars. And then Muse of Nightmares is also another case where I fucking adored the second book. And so this might be one of those cases where it might be a more regular instance that the second book is not as good, but I've definitely experienced some oddities here and there where I have liked the second book equally, if not more. It's never that I like it more than the first one, but it's definitely that it's on par, if not a little bit better, but they both end up being 5 stars. I've definitely had a few of those this year, and I am genuinely happy that I got to experience those, though I don't think that's the norm a lot of the time. Enemies to lovers is the best trope, and I also have to agree with this to an extent. Now, again, because I've been reading books quite recently that don't necessarily have a prevalent romance subplot, I figure out that I love that too, and I can definitely do without the romance. But enemies to lovers, if it's executed well, and I can definitely see enemies to lovers transition, I would say I absolutely adore it. I think it's the angst and it's that development between characters and whatever scenes and situations make them grow closer that is really satisfying to read. And again, the tension, it's just really great. Though I will say a lot of the time these books that are cataloged as enemies to lovers are not enemies to lovers. They are hate to love. They are indifference to love. And so I think for me to truly say it is the best trope, I'd have to experience a true enemies to lovers where they are at war with each other. They have genuinely gone out of their way to hurt each other, murder each other, and they have done some horrible things against each other because they are genuinely enemies. And then if they transition to lovers, I would love that. But I think it's very rare that I have experienced that in my lifetime. And most of the time it ends up being rivals to lovers, hate to love, or indifference to love. I don't even know if indifference to love is a thing, but I have experienced quite a few of those that have been cataloged as enemies to lovers, and it's just untrue. However, if you do have a very strong enemies to lovers book, let me know down below, because I'd definitely be down to read that, because I think it's really hard to come by a true one. But for all intents and purposes, I think enemies to lovers, hate to love, indifference to love, rivals to lovers all kind of encompass the same feeling. And I will say a lot of those come really high on my trope tier. I will say I enjoy them quite a lot. Somebody said in all caps, and they weren't the only person, take the book jacket off when reading. Jesus, it's not that hard. I agree with this, and I know a lot of people don't like to take their dust jackets off when they're reading. I don't know why. I personally take the dust jacket off immediately. I sit down, and if I open a book with the dust jacket on, it feels wrong. It feels like I'm committing a crime. It feels like I'm about to be put into Monopoly jail, like I'm gonna give myself a jail card for Monopoly. It just feels all sorts of wrong. So I do think this is a pretty basic and common opinion. I think the norm is to typically take the dust jacket off, not even necessarily for the comfortability, because I don't think it offers any comfortability to take it off. I think it's rather the safety to not bend or break or rip the dust jacket. Absolutely, 100%. I do this every time. I love spicy scenes, and I say spicy because it's between like the sparklies, and I don't know how else to represent that verbally, so I'm just gonna say it like that. I also love spicy scenes. I think when done correctly and at the right time and not overdoing it in the stories that don't need to overdo it, I think they're fantastic. I think they're great. I think it's a point of release and deeper connection in some cases for certain characters in certain stories, and I really do enjoy it. I find that a lot of the time, if not in every single instance, I prefer smut or spicy scenes or sexy scenes or sex, however we want to call it, in fantasy rather than in a contemporary setting. There's just something, again, see, I just love the angst. Don't like it in real life, take it away. Jail card for you, don't want it. But in books, it's the angst of, oh my god, we're gonna die and it's the end of the world and it might be our last time. That just hits different. And it's the, again, the enemies to lovers, hate to love sort of element, and then them finally like smashing against the wall and finally doing it. I think it's a great way to give the characters a lot of agency and to kind of give them their own choice at doing something, if they do want to go through with it or not. There is nothing wrong between two grown adults who want to have sex. It's, yeah, it works. It works for me. Twilight is a really good series. I don't know if this is popular or unpopular. How do I judge this? I think in my circles, it's really unpopular. Maybe for the time. I think if we're talking 2005, if we're talking the time that the movie was coming out, that the books were being published, everybody agrees with that. That was a really basic common opinion. Everybody was reading Twilight. Everybody was loving Twilight. Everybody was lining up to buy the new releases, to go to the premieres of the movies. It was a really basic thing. Don't lie. You had your Robert Pattinson poster on your room, didn't you? You had the merch. You had the DVDs. You bought Tiger Beats exclusively because you wanted the poster. I know that because I did that too. And I can't even lie. I definitely was a part of the craze. I was definitely a Twihard when I was younger. There's no shame in saying that. Do I think they're good now? No. And that's called growth. But right now, I think there's been a lot of people rereading Twilight, and there's been this surge of people who have spotted problematic things about it. The writing is nowhere near objectively good, and particularly with the Kile, with the tribe, it's definitely things that need to be critiqued and that need to be pointed out. So I don't know under what standard we're judging this in. Is it basic? It might be now. Was it then? Yes. Really don't know. I'm torn on this one. A bookmark majority of the time is necessary. By the way, love your channel and hope all is well. Thank you very much. I love you too, and all is well. Thank you very much. I don't know if I'd say bookmarks are necessary. I would say I appreciate things like, I guess, like Book Depository and our beautiful sponsor, Book of the Month, that they include bookmarks within their boxes, and it's nice. So you're buying a book and you're getting like a free bookmark, like a freebie. That's great. Going out of your way to buy a bookmark though, unless it's something from a fandom that you really adore, sure. But is it really a necessity? I can grab a post-it and put that as a bookmark. I have no issues doing it. I've done it in the past. But I will say, the whole bookmark thing, it's really basic. You basic, but I love you anyway. And what am I saying? I'm probably basic too because I use a bookmark every single time. It's fine. Love fantasy books with my whole heart. You can't go wrong with a bit of escapism. And if we're talking booktube in particular, this is probably the most basic opinion you'll ever find. Booktube at its core, it's primarily fantasy. I think we can all agree with that, especially YA fantasy. For some reason, I guess we've all fallen under that pit. There are obviously people within booktube that read other genres. There's a little corner for everything. But I will say in this corner of the internet of the world, fantasy is probably the most read genre. I don't know by what standard I'm judging this in, but based on what I see, it might be true. And I agree with you because I love fantasy and I love escapism. It's definitely the one thing that allowed me to not focus on the things that were happening in my household when I was younger. I definitely love fantasy and I've loved it for years now, and it'll continue to be my favorite genre because it's not only allowed me to read some great stories that have made me cry and laugh and love, but that have also again taken me out of reality when I needed it, and stories that have allowed me to connect with people and just to talk to people about books and chat about, and it's a great time. I love fantasy. And here we are. We've stumbled upon it. It's here. The Grishaverse is my favorite YA fantasy universe, and I'd say that's a pretty basic opinion. Probably as basic as it gets with a lot of things, including the fantasy genre. I personally didn't love the Grishaverse. We've been over this. We always end up here. We always end up here. I always bring myself here. I didn't love the Grishaverse. I think it's really admirable what Leigh Bardugo has managed to do. Personally, I'm not a fan. Secondhand used books are underrated, and I'd agree with this. I don't know why we always kind of fall under this trap of we've got to buy a book new, and why are they so expensive, and I wish I could buy more books for the same amount of money. And you can. It's just that you'll probably need to go out of your way to look for used copies or secondhand editions, and I personally have been guilty of falling under that trap, except that when I found out that thrift books exist, I really figured out that there are cheaper ways to get books, and there's just something beautiful about getting a copy that has been through it. Not necessarily a paperback, but also a hardcover. Like I literally have Layer of Dreams, and this is a library copy, and I have other books like that too that have just been used, have gotten here beat and battered. Like literally my copy of Oathbringer in the white editions from the Stormlight archive is beat as fuck, but I like it. There's history to it. Somebody read it and loved it and now has passed it on to somebody else, and now I get to have it and love it. I really want to start getting more used books, especially I don't know, there's just something about used classics that really get me. It's just a really beautiful story, I guess. It just looks old. It's kind of like an ode to its time and everything that the story's been through. I'm making it deeper than it needs to be, but I love it, and I definitely think that they're underrated. Huge books are discouraging. I will say that I agree to an extent. I think definitely seeing a 1,000 page book, seeing an 800 page book is really intimidating to just a simple eye. What I have stumbled across, which is very interesting, I guess, guess, is that most of the times when I've read a big book or a bigger book, the content inside is relatively easy, if not incredibly easy to understand. That might not be for every author, but the ones that I have read and experienced are relatively easy to understand. And so I think a lot of the times what happens is that the size ends up being more intimidating than the content itself. And I've definitely experienced those sort of stories. So I personally say, kind of similar to don't judge a book by its cover, I would maybe say that don't judge a book by its size, maybe. It depends, I guess, on the book and how interesting you guys may find it, but I would say don't put a book off just because it's long. If it sounds interesting, go ahead. What do you know? You'll end up loving the story and it'll last for a little bit longer and you'll get to stay with the world a little bit longer than a regular shorter book, so it might be worth your time. I actually got this one a lot as well, and I found it really surprising because I've never really heard this one before, but I will say I do agree, but this one came up a lot. You can learn reading romance books, and I find it really interesting because I don't know, particularly with this one, how basic or not it is. Let me know down below if you have the same opinion. I think it's an interesting one because what I find happens a lot with romance books, and I talked about this in one of my other videos, I can't remember which one it was, but what happens a lot is the miscommunication trope, which is obviously really relevant and it reflects a lot of what happens in real life. Miscommunication happens. We're humans. Sometimes we are afraid of saying things because we're afraid of messing up and losing someone. Sometimes we just don't want to say things for the sake of not hurting somebody else, or sometimes we just don't want to say things because we just are not bothered. And so while I think it's a very realistic outlook on what happens with human interaction, I don't like seeing it in books. But I will say, as far as that particular trope goes, I think there is a lot to learn about that in romance books. And I think because all of these characters, I guess they constantly fall under the same pit traps of miscommunication, and a lot of times all of these tropes end up kind of blurring together because they're very similar and they overlap through books. I think it's really interesting, I guess, in a way, to look at it from that perspective of you can look at those and see what not to do when you're in a relationship, or what to do when you're in a relationship, what might potentially make somebody feel very special and what might make them feel unwelcome or unsafe or uncomfortable. And so I think from that standpoint, it's really interesting. I'd never looked at it that way, but I do agree that it's really, I guess, intriguing in a way to dissect the text and see where the couple went wrong and how you can potentially apply that as a lesson to your real life. A lot of you said that, and I had never thought about that. Let me know if you guys have thought about that before. Movie tie-in covers are ugly almost most of the time, and this is extremely basic, and I do agree. A lot of the time, these movie tie-in editions are horrible. Again, they've got the actors on it. I don't want to see the actors. I don't care. That's what I'm watching the adaptation for. I don't need that in my book. Also, sometimes they bring in that ugly sticker, and I hate every second of it. And sometimes they bring in the sticker that's not a sticker. I can't do nothing. It's not a sticker, but it says Netflix, an original Netflix series. I don't care. I'm watching it anyway, but you don't need to put it in the book. I get it for hype reasons. I get it for marketing purposes. I understand it. Do I love it though? No. With this one, I guess it doesn't bother me as much. Yeah, the sticker thing, the whole real people on the cover thing. Look, even The Last Wish for The Witcher has Henry Cavill on the cover. I don't even want that. I love that man. He's hot as shit. Don't want it. And I think this is a perfect one to end on. I think it's super cute, and it's one that I definitely agree with. Keeping books that you've read and disliked prevents other people from discovering them. As soon as I read something and don't like it, I pass it on to thrift stores. Imagine how happy someone else would be to find it. Better than letting it collect dust. And as a person who recently unhauled 60 books, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I recently went through all of my bookshelves, hence why they are different now, and I really took away books that I'd read the first book in series and I don't plan to carry on because I didn't really think it was anything special, or because it was a book that I rated low, and I just passed them on. And I think there's such a big beauty in that, in just reading something and maybe kind of liking it, or it kind of being mediocre for you, or you're really loving it and deciding to pass it on, or really disliking something and passing it on. I think there's something so beautiful about that, because not only did you as an individual get to experience the story, whatever the outcome was, but now you're getting to spread that love of reading to somebody else. I find a joy in giving other people books, whether it's new books, used books, books that I've liked, books that I've disliked, and what do you know, maybe it'll be somebody who can't really afford a new book, somebody who wants to get into reading, or maybe some book that you give away will be a book that will get somebody else into reading. And I think it's honestly a gorgeous thing to do. It's giving me chills for some reason. It's cheesy and stupid like that, but I genuinely love every second of it. I try and do it constantly, and I agree with that. I don't know if it's basic or not, but I definitely see a lot of beauty in that. And that is it for today, you guys. Those are all of the basic book opinions that I could run through for today. Let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of these. We can chat down in the comments as we typically do. I love talking to you guys about all of these things. If you reached the end of the video, let's leave the T emoji down below. Whatever T emoji you want. I know there's a bunch of them. Let's leave a T emoji down below. We spilled the tea on all of the basicness today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like button down below and subscribe if you haven't already for more bookish content here on the channel. And if you want more exclusive content from me or to support the channel further, you can hit the Patreon link down below and join us over on the Citadel. That is linked down below again, as well as all of my social medias. You guys know the drill. Again, thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget that you can check them out over at the top of the description box over on my link, and you can use the code MelReads to get your first book for $9.99 as per usual. And yeah, I love you guys so much, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye guys.